The assault on Israel's legitimacy. Firstly, just to explain why we don't like the word delegitimization, which in Hebrew which has become a Hebrew word. It's used across the board in this country without any agreement as to what it means or what it should mean. It's a bad word. It does our enemy's job for us. It creates in our minds the idea that something bad is happening to the state of Israel. We don't want to focus on that. We want to focus on the fact that there is somebody perpetrating an attack. The assault on Israel, the assault on the legitimacy of Israel. What I'm going to talk about, though, is the, if you like, the longer-term aspects of it, the broader or deeper aspects of it, rather than the specifics of the current challenges of UDI, which Dan has mentioned and you've discussed previously. As one more opening point, I'd have to say that this assault on Israel's legitimacy is not new. I'm younger than many of the people in the room. The battles for Israel's standing in the world have been around forever, and they may well also stay around for a while. The challenge is how we make sure that this kind of assault doesn't gain the ground that we don't want it to gain. The challenge, therefore, that we face at the moment is that the nature of the assault, the nature of the arguments that are being used, the kinds of deployments that are in play are, if you like, they carry with them more risk perhaps than in the past, because not only have our opponents' tactics changed and evolved and become more sophisticated, but the audiences that they are targeting have perhaps become less immunized, if you like, to the kinds of talk and the kinds of language and the kinds of ideas that they're trying to purvey. I won't take much time talking about what we're dealing with here. We're dealing with a propaganda campaign, whether it's the use of the word apartheid, whether it's a flotilla, whether it's BDS. It's all part of one broad propaganda campaign to tar Israel and to use words as weapons, as Dan likes to say. Einat Wilf, one of your fellow parliamentarians from this country, has referred to this as an assault on the idea of Israel. And I think that's a very important insight, insofar as it is the very idea of Israel that is at stake here, with many of the arguments that are put out there by our opponents being ones that would challenge whether there even should be an Israel, let alone how it behaves. So the what is a propaganda campaign, the how, through criminalizing Israel. I'm borrowing here from Erwin Kotler's analysis. Many of you will have heard it and read it, but fundamentally the appropriation and the use and abuse of the most powerful words in the Western lexicon and using them solely as a way of beating Israel over the head. Lawfare, apartheid, BDS, etc. It's all basically a way of saying that nationalism is kosher. It may not be fashionable, but it's kosher. Jewish nationalism is treif. That's what the basic agenda here is. Why are they doing it? What's the objective? What's the objective here is a political reality that they want to change. They want to create a new political reality. They're acting to undermine the political and public support for Israel's continued existence. They're acting to undermine Israel's freedom of action, and freedom of action to fulfill its legitimate sovereign rights as any other country would. They're also undermining those who are engaged in engaging. They're undermining people who are trying to reach out between Israeli society and Palestinian society to actually create some sort of foundation for genuine reconciliation. So fundamentally, at the end of the day, the new political reality these guys are trying to achieve is one that serves to undermine all efforts to bring about reconciliation and peace. So we've got the what, how, and why. The where, I think, is worth standing on for a second. Which areas are at risk? Which are the parts of our societies, Western societies, that are most endangered here? And it's clear that where we see the least effective, if you like, the least effective immunization against the kind of ideas, the kind of poison that our opponents are trying to put into the system, the least effective immunization exists in more liberal audiences, younger audiences, and if we take a geographic array, then clearly the dangers are much greater in Europe than they are in the United States. An extra complicating factor, which I think is really important if we're going to be effective at dealing with this, and sometimes this gets caught up in the politics of it here, but we won't go there. The distinction needs to be made between the hostile assault that is taking place, but which is taking place in the hands of rather few people. If we look around the world, the number of people who are genuinely engaged in hostile activity and genuine attempt to undermine the existence and the rights of Israel are few in number. But we have a parallel issue which interplays with that, which is the ongoing, if you like, distancing or the ongoing drift of many aspects of our societies away from Israel for all sorts of reasons. But that drift, it becomes an opportunity for our enemies to try and tap into it, to try and change its character and turn the drift into rift, if you like. Send people, instead of from being just not relating to Israel, not interested in Israel, to turn them into actually actively engaged in hostile anti-Israel activities. This is one of the key successes of the BDS movement. To whatever degree it has achieved some success, apart from getting its idea somehow onto the agenda, but it gives ordinary people something to do. And there's a lesson there for all of us. So what are we doing? Firstly, the Israeli government as a whole is taking this issue much more seriously than it would have done even 3 years ago. And if you like, in general, the whole presentation of Israel abroad and how significant that is something that is understood today far better than it was even a few years ago. I think the Goldstone report was the major catalyst for that, but also the issues of universal jurisdiction will have had their impact, and others. We are getting much greater resourcing and coordination within the government. Speaking on behalf of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, our budgets for public relations and things like that have increased by many tens of % over the last 3 years. We have more positions in place, more people being able to handle the array of work. For example, in London, the guy in charge of, the Hasbara guy in London was meant to deal with the Jewish community, the Christian community, the campus community, the unions, and I don't know, everything else that wasn't actually, in the political world. Now we've got 2 people in that position to try and make it to make it possible to reach out to more people and so on. And we're also developing strategies, which I'll go into in just a second. New ministries have been created here in Israel, which are addressing this issue. And there is also a much greater integration, and we're seeing it now in the preparations for the current flotilla, much greater integration of issues of how we present ourselves and how our story is told, much greater integration of those considerations into the decision-making, planning, and execution of what we do. In terms of our strategy, the strategic objective that we're trying to promote is an objective of anchoring Israel in the international community. If our enemy's objective and attempt is to cut us off, to set us adrift, our job has to be to continue to make sure that we are anchored in everything that moves. Take the OECD as an example, and you'll be interested to know that there's I'll get to that in a second. Israel got accepted a year ago, into the OECD. After a quiet and effective diplomatic campaign over a few years. Why? Because it's the right thing for us. It's good for Israel economically and politically. Was it done because of delegitimization? Absolutely not. It was done because it's the right thing. But is it an answer to the assault on Israel's legitimacy? Of course it is. It's the best answer. Because we're not in their frame, we're in our frame. We're promoting our country, promoting our interests, connecting us to what moves and what counts. And that way, their agenda just gets swamped. Interestingly, at the MFA today, we're hosting an OECD conference on limiting bureaucracy. I think that's quite ironic, but that's what we're doing. So that's the strategic objective, anchoring. We've got 4 basic thrusts, if you like, in that. In the more specific, how to counter the assault. 4 thrusts. One is to carry the battle to the enemy. Okay, enough of them making us the issue. We have to make them the issue. The second thrust is where we need to reach out and engage with the relevant constituencies, the people who count in the places that count. We always have done that, but we clearly have to do more of that. We have to reach out, whether it's Wikipedia or Amnesty International or whatever it might be. We need to be in play in the places that are in play, and we have to do that more effectively. We have to have the relationships that count. The third pillar is we have to tell our story. We have to tell our story better, and we're trying to do that. We're trying to do all these things. Clearly, the other side is trying to brand us. It's trying to brand us very, very negatively. We have to brand ourselves, and we're doing that in terms of who Israel is and who our people are and what we stand for. But we also have to tell our story, our political story, more effectively, and we've talked about that. You've talked about that today, the whole notion of Israeli rights, Jewish rights in this land, and so on. We have to be able to tell those stories more effectively. The fourth aspect is as I use the example of the OECD, maintain our course. There's 2 sort of principles then that need to guide us. Then we have to fight the battles. We have to fight these battles. If 10 years ago when I was in London, somebody came to me and somebody said that Israel was an apartheid state, I would have said, let's ignore it. It's not getting any play. It's not got any coverage, any traction. It won't get anywhere. It's irrelevant. Nowadays, we can't easily say that. We have to find ways to sort of acknowledge that is out there, move on, and make our play. Finally then, because I've got the red light thing sort of staring at me and I'm trying to be as quick as I can, what do we need from our friends? Okay, I've talked a bit about what we're trying to do, and there's obviously a whole lot more that I could tell. But what is it that we're looking for our friends? And politically, given that this is a political campaign, it's not just about, they said, and they had a lecture, and then we have an event, and they're talking and we're talking. There are political objectives these guys are trying to achieve. So we need political pushback as well. Firstly, we're looking for all of our friends who can make a difference to help join in the effort to anchor Israel as a full and legitimate partner in the community of nations. This involves promoting partnerships, promoting the inclusion of Israel and Israelis in relevant fora, etc., etc. We also look to our friends to stand up and oppose any effort whose purpose is to challenge or undermine that first agenda. We have to stand up to the lies and the vilification that is out there in the political and public sphere, and we have to promote scrutiny of those who are working to undermine shared and common objectives between us and our fellow Western democracies, and I think that's where Gerald can elaborate in just a minute. Finally, we need people to rejoin the battle of ideas. This is a battle of ideas. There are dangerous and malicious ideas out there that are being used against us, and if we stand back and say, hey, you know what, whatever, I've got other things to do, we in Israel, we don't have the luxury or the right to stand back and not engage, and we look to those who are like-minded and who care about the same things as we do to also engage, because ultimately it's the ideas here that will win the day. Thank you very much.